So one of the things I got into this album, or I discovered this album, I think in late 95. So I was about 12, 13 maybe. And a friend of mine got it for his birthday in December in 95, and I had to wait till Christmas to get my copy. And I think we'd got into the Unplugged album shortly before. And I still remember hearing this album for the first time, and it was just one of those albums. You know, I was bragging about it to a mate of mine and his mum when she picked him up from my house, you know, playtime after school. It's just one of those albums that just I can't even say enough about it, you know.
Yeah. Well, it's a cultural thing, like it's a cultural shift, you know. But when you boil it down, it's full of great songs, and nothing beats great songs, you know. It would have been a great album no matter what style it was wrapped in, but having great songs presented in that such a powerful musical way, it's a force that you couldn't stop, and the timing was right, and all you know, the timing was right for them, and you can look back and sort of make all these, you know, assessments looking back at it, but at the time it was all new, you know, particularly coming out of the 80s as well. Like there's a couple of 80s kind of flavors to the production, like with guitar, chorus, kind of guitar things, but it was just so fresh. It just sounded fresh and new, and let's not forget what a great singer Kurt was, you know, killer voice.
Yeah, I remember reading like a lot of those bands at the time maybe didn't attract the female fan base as much as Nirvana did, and I don't know if it was in the Heavier Than Heaven biography. I don't know if you've read this by Charles R. Cross.
No.
Yeah, back when I used to read books, this was a beauty. I think he said like the female fans loved Kurt's voice.
Yeah, cool. Yeah.
He had a great voice.
Well, the other thing is with the lyrics, like Kurt was kind of obscure. He wasn't overly literal. Like his lyrics are kind of evocative, so they weren't steeped in some kind of rock cliche. And I think he was very mindful of that and very keen to avoid rock cliches with his lyrics. So that would be another attractive aspect of their music to people of different different fan bases and different genders, you know, like it wasn't sort of homogenous.
Yeah. For so many great albums released that year in 1991, which we've been covering a few here on the podcast, they were all very different. Like we were saying, like, you know, the two Guns N' Roses Use Your Illusion albums released like a week prior to this Nevermind album. Two very different albums, and you had Skid Row's Slave to the Grind, Blood Sugar Sex Magic by the Chili Peppers released on the same day as Nevermind. Again, very different. You know, you got sort of nastier songs like Sir Psycho Sexy on there, and definitely provocative sort of lyrics. Very different to Nirvana. Soundgarden's Bad Motorfinger released in October of that year. Temple of the Dog, you know, just a crazy year for music. And the Black Album, all very different albums, but all very successful for each of those artists, and they just became classics. What was going on around that time? Do you remember?
Well, I was in a different hemisphere than music. I was listening to the Stone Roses and My Bloody Valentine, who put out an album in 91 as well, Loveless. So I kind of, my entry into that world that you just mentioned was pretty much through Nirvana. You know, because I hadn't really listened to much hard rock in the mid to late 80s. You know, I was in a different orbit. You know, and I guess maybe like after the 80s, the world was ready for some heavy guitars again.
Yeah.
And all those bands you mentioned, you know, are all exponents of hard rock in their own way. And, you know, Nirvana are essentially a hard rock band, but they were probably the exception to the rule in so many ways. And you know, Kurt's songs being kind of the main point of difference, because they, like I said, they weren't steeped in kind of rock tradition. They were quirky, and the chord progressions were unconventional. you know, they had a familiarity to their sound, but the songs were unconventional. You put those chords together and you think, how does that work? How do you make that work?